Hello. So today we are doing tree molas, and I have my picture of my tree. I drew it out with my white chalk on my black paper. Now, one thing I can do is I can use scissors and I can cut out my tree, or at least the large areas, like so. Now, for those of you that have lots of little skinny branches and you want it to be like perfectly cut out, you can get a cutting mat right here and an X-Acto knife. On the X-Acto knife, the blade is the shiny part at the bottom, not this part. So when I'm using an X-Acto knife, I am not cutting near my hand. So notice where my hands are when I cut. When you are pressing on the X-Acto knife, I am not squeezing it really hard and pushing down like I'm gonna stab something. Very gently, just pulling the knife along. If I need to, I can make repeated cuts and just follow my same line. And then I can cut out my tree branches this way. If I need to turn the paper, I can just rotate it, keeping my hands out of the way. If I see you cutting towards your hands, you will not be allowed to use an X-Acto knife. And I can keep rotating the paper. Now your white will smear as you work because it is chalk. So you can always draw it in pencil if you'd rather. It's just easier to see if it's in the white chalk. So I'm taking my time, I'm rotating my paper as I go. And remember, you can also use scissors. So this is step one. Okay, so I've cut out my tree. It's got some white chalk on it, but I can always either flip it over or I can brush the chalk off if you like this side better. I'm just gonna flip mine over. I also got a little piece of tape just to kind of stick it down so it's not jostling around while I'm tracing it. So now I'm going to trace my tree. I'm not gonna trace right next to the paper. I'm gonna go a bit away from the black. So about a pencil width around, and just kind of eyeball it. So I want the next color, whatever color you pick, I picked orange, to be bigger than the bottom color. So I'm just kind of lightly sketching outside around the tree. And if you can zoom in there, you can see the space. Like, you don't want it to be right up on top of the black. You want to space it out some, so that when I cut it out, my orange tree will be much, much bigger than my black tree, like so. So I've cut out my black tree, I've cut out my orange tree, and so my next step is to get another color. I'm not really liking this red behind it because it's so close to the orange color, so doesn't really contrast very well. But just for an example's purposes, for the example, I'm just going to use it. So the same thing, I'm going to trace not next to the orange, but away from the orange. So I'm going to trace around the red tree, and then I'll show you the next step. A quick tip, I see I changed my color to blue. Instead of going in here, there's not really enough space, so I'm just kind of going around the edges now, instead of going into the little openings. So here is kind of my shapes all cut out. Now I have done 3 colors on top of a 4th color. You can keep going and do more if you have time. But when you're finished, you would glue all your pieces together. So I would take a glue stick and I would glue all of this down. Then my last step, my finishing touches, are to get colors, smaller pieces, and see how I have this large, open, black, negative space? And in the Mola pictures I showed you on the PowerPoint, all these spaces were filled up with designs. So we're going to put little shapes that fit inside of our tree into the negative space and stack those colors too. And we would glue those down. Now I just cut some random pieces for video purposes, but you can cut a smaller tree shape to fit inside your tree. And you're going to layer little chunks of color on top of each other into the negative spaces. You can also do that in your background. You can cut out shapes and you can fill them into your background. Like if you had a cat, I saw some pictures with cats or bats or whatever, you could put those in your background. You could make leaves and cut out little leaf shapes. And you could also apply those to your tree if you like, to make it a little bit more visually interesting. Have fun!